President Trump has in the last few moments just arrived at the site of the G7 summit you see there in France. That's Hotel Royal in Evian, of course. These moments, just video from the last few moments, of course, the importance of this meeting as he meets with G7 leaders is critical, and it comes just, hours, of course, since we've seen that diplomatic breakthrough in the war between the United States and Iran. The agreement has been reached, as we heard from the president. Many leaders will be there, I'm sure, applauding that agreement. It's not a deal so far, of course. That's expected over the weekend. In fact, in the last few moments, we did hear that from Vice President J.D. Vance saying that the goal is to release the exact text with the agreement with Iran sometime in the coming days. But it's not a deal yet. It has not been signed. And many questions still remain about exactly what is in this agreement. President Trump, as you're looking at these live pictures from Evian in France, is there, of course, for the G7. And the focus will be not just on Ukraine, but also on what has happened with Iran. The potential deal would be to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, end the US blockade on Iranian ports, and serve as a framework for future negotiations. But the details are vague, as I was saying. No text has been released, although J.D. Vance is saying that can come in the coming days. And already we are seeing what could be significant gaps between the United States, Israel, and Iran. Let me give you a sense of what Iran is saying. They say that talks would hinge on the US meeting certain commitments, and that includes the release of billions of dollars of frozen Iranian funds, something Washington, we know, rejects. Iran also says it will collect fees for ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz after Trump said there will be no tolls. And then there's the other element of that, and that is Lebanon. Iran says the proposal must include an end to the conflict there, but Israel says it will not withdraw from southern Lebanon. Our senior international correspondent, Melissa Bell, is in Evian in France, the site of the G7 summit, the site, of course, where we've seen President Trump just arriving. Our Jeremy Diamond, as you can see there, is in Tel Aviv. I do want to begin, though, with Melissa. So, Melissa, give us a sense of how much of this framework we front and center. I know that some of the leaders have already been commenting on this. Some of them, of course, who were not on board with this war in Iran. How will this be received? How is it being received by many of the leaders there?
There's a great deal of hope, a great deal more than there was, but there is also a great deal of caution in how they're expressing that hope. And of course, remember that none of the other G7 leaders who are to meet with President Trump have seen any of the text of this. It's really unclear what is inside it, or indeed how we get through to Friday with all the potential there is for this thing to be derailed and get to that signing ceremony without any major issue occurring. Still, G7 leaders, remember, they've had a difficult relationship, the counterparts of President Trump within this group over the course of the last few months, and specifically on this issue. So the fact that he arrives with this memorandum of understanding digitally signed and in his pocket at least, and pleased that he is able to do so given all of the tensions there have been over what he's felt is the lack of cooperation he's had from leaders of the G7 and European leaders on this issue and in trying to force open the Strait of Hormuz, that sense of satisfaction with which he'll be arriving could go a great way to helping this G7 go rather better than did the last one. You'll remember that it was the G7 in Canada that he'd stormed out of early, the French presidency really doing everything to ensure that this time President Trump stays. Now, Iran was always going to be central to these talks. There are the leaders of Egypt, Qatar, and the UAE who are due here tomorrow to take part in those discussions. Still, with these latest breakthrough, that is going to be much more central to these discussions than it was going to be even before. What you've heard from European leaders, Issa, is this willingness to come and step in and now be involved in these peace negotiations, take a greater part within them. We've been hearing that from the EU's top diplomats, Kaja Kallas. We've also been hearing from the French presidency itself that the military assets that are involved in the global but Franco-British-led initiative to keep navigation open on the Strait of Hormuz once hostilities have ended, those military assets, says President Macron, are in place. All we need now is for those hostilities to cease. So there is hope that this might be the beginning of something, and clearly for the rest of the G7, the desperate need that this thing is brought to an end, if only for the economic problems that it has brought them, Issa.
Indeed, and there have been numerous, of course.
CNN's Elena Trine is in Geneva, where Air Force One touched down just a little while ago. Elena, just a short time ago, the president posted that ships are starting to move out of the Strait of Hormuz. What else can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right. The president eager to tout, I think, what is this new agreement between the United States and Iran at a time, of course, when he is about to meet with several European leaders, many of whom, Wolf, that he had clashed with openly regarding this war, and specifically what he argued was their refusal to help the United States in reopening the Strait of Hormuz. I do want to note we are actually just seeing images now of the president arriving in Evian-les-Bains, getting out of his motorcade and greeting some of the people there in France. But to get back to what we were hearing about this agreement, I think there are a lot of questions, many I have included, that I've been going to my sources about what exactly this agreement looks like. We have not yet seen the text. We did hear the Vice President, J.D. Vance, say this morning that he's hoping that they can release the text this week. But what we do know, isn't it, Wolf, is one, really this desire to dismantle Iran's nuclear program. That was always going to be a key provision of this. They also say that in the agreement, and this is according to U.S. officials, in the agreement is a provision to allow the United States to go in to retrieve the highly enriched uranium still in Iran's possession and to destroy it on site. Then also there's these big questions about the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and when that will happen. We did hear the president argue yesterday that it would be reopened following the signing ceremony on Friday here in Geneva. But Vance, when speaking this morning with CNBC, argued that whether or not it will actually be a toll-free Strait of Hormuz, that's going to be part of negotiations down the line. Listen to how he said it.
Well, our expectation is that the strait is going to be opened in a toll-free way for the long term, and that's the sort of thing that we're going to figure out in these technical negotiations. You know, there are a lot of very important details to figure out that we're actually going to sit at the table and discuss together and figure out a path forward on these details.
Yeah, so look, as you heard there from Vance, far less forthright than what we have heard really from the president, insisting that there will be no tolls on the strait moving forward. Vance, as you heard him say there, saying that this is going to be part of those highly technical talks that take place in that 60-day period following the signing, where they're really going to have to talk about the specifics of how to implement the deal, of how to go in and retrieve and destroy that highly enriched uranium, about how to make sure that there are the right enforcement mechanisms in place. All of that still to come down the line. But again, I think, from the conversations I've been having with officials, they really do argue that this is something the president wanted. He wanted to head into this G7 summit with a victory in hand and the Iran war. And that's how they are likely going to be framing it, even as there are many questions that persist about the timing of when this is going to be implemented, questions about monetary compensation, something Iranians said needs to be, funds unfrozen need to be happening before those 60-day talks can take place. Hearing different things from the U.S. arguing that there will be no monetary compensation for Iran until they begin to comply with some of the main objectives of that MOU. So a lot of questions, I think, that's still to be had. Hopefully, in moments when we see this bilateral meeting between President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron, we will be able to get some answers out of President Trump. We'll see, but we're staying tuned for that now upon his arrival there in France, Wolf.
All right, Elena Trine in Geneva for us. Elena, thank you very, very much.